All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Telephone number 870-275-9799. So we've been covering for a while now what's been going on in China. We've talked a lot about, we talked with General Spaulding from the Hudson Institute a few times. We talk about the U.S.-China relationship. We talk about the forced organ harvesting that goes on over in China. But what I haven't specifically talked about is China's persecution of ethnic minorities that they believe are, politically inconvenient, and that's a nice way of putting it. Specifically, the Uyghur Muslim community in China. And so I wanted to bring on. We have Mrs. Louisa Greve, or how do you pronounce your last name, Louisa?
Good morning, Paul. Greve.
Greve, that's right. Louisa Greve. She's the director of global advocacy for the Uyghur Human Rights Project. Louisa, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure.
First of all, how'd you get started in this human rights project?
I've always had a heart for the underdog, and so studying China, I started looking at the way the Communist Party can do what it wants. No democracy, no rights, and looked at the Tibetans, Christians, and the Uyghur people.
So what do we need to know? I mean, what do we need to know that we don't know about what the Communist Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs?
Well, it has to do with freedom of religion, something very, very close to the hearts of all Americans. And also there's an economic connection that I'd love to tell you about. So right now, the General Secretary of the Communist Party is a guy named Xi Jinping, and about 5 years ago he decided we need to sinify religion, which kind of sounds sinister to us. It just means make religions Chinese. And what that ends up meaning is all religions must conform to the Communist Party, and as you well know, communists don't believe in religion. So what do you think that does to Christians, Tibetans, Buddhists, and Uyghur Muslims?
Well, it puts them, you're either going to be loyal to your faith or you're going to be loyal to the government at that point. So, they've got a choice to make there. And I can't speak for the Muslims, but as a Christian myself, I know what the Christian community would say to that.
Absolutely. So one thing your listeners do need to know is officials at the local level across China are taking down crosses. They're arresting pastors and their families just for their faith, for holding, worship services. Now, what's happening to the Uyghurs, who are Muslim, have been since, for 1,000 years, it's a serious program of all-out war on a people. So these people live in Western China. It's their homeland. We call it the Uyghur homeland. They've been there for 1,000 years, long before the communists came along. And right now they've been rounded up in vast numbers and put in internment camps. So, when you think of that, you know it's something serious. That usually happens in wartime. It's always condemned. And China's gotten away with this for 2.5 years before the world has woken up.
So I saw this this morning from the New York Post. China is scrambling to cover leaks on detention camps for religious minorities. So there's been some information that's gotten out about this. And, of course, China's going to try to clamp down on it. Are they doing organ harvesting?
That's something that it looks very likely. When you round up, and I'm going to give you a number that'll really blow your mind, at least 1 million, according to the U.S. State Department, possibly over 2 million people have been taken from their homes. There's a population around 12 million people, so, like 4 times the population of Arkansas.
Wow.
It's a nation of people that have, been around, had their own homeland for, 1,000 years. And they are being rounded up in huge numbers in secret detention. Do you know what happens when you don't have rule of law, when you don't have rights, when there is no fair trial? We don't know what's happening to those people. We have some survivors, and they're talking about horrible torture and huge program of indoctrination. I'd love to tell you about that in a second. But it's quite possible that people disappear. And what happened? China has a big organ transplant industry, which, in a way, you think about it, that's life-saving work, right? We really appreciate it. We've learned how to, allow people to have an organ transplant when their organs fail. But in China, there is not a sufficient voluntary program like, here you put it on your driver's license, right, to be an organ donor. It's a good thing. But they don't have that system. And for 20 years, China did that based on prisoners on death row, but also prisoners of conscience.
Yeah, I mean, I had a guest on who talked about, Israel has banned, I think, travel there for medical procedures because people were scheduling their heart transplants. Like, oh, I can't be there this week. I got to have a heart transplant. It's like, how do you schedule a heart transplant? Oh, well, I'm going to China. I mean, it's just a level of depravity. I don't think no one's really comfortable confronting this. You mentioned indoctrination. I mean, if you're one of these Uyghurs, you go in, and I guess you can recant. Is there a way to recant to get your freedom?
Well, not really. So people have talked about, very few people have actually survived the camps, got out of the camp, or released home, and then be able to get out of the country to tell the free world what's happening. But a few people who are actually ethnic Kazakhs, who are another Turkic Muslim people, and 2 Uyghurs who are actually out here in America. They've found freedom here. Extremely grateful to America for letting them stay here. And they have talked about being forced to say, I don't believe in God. I made a mistake in my thinking. I had diseased thinking for believing in God. I will never make that mistake again, and I believe in the Communist Party. Now, this is over and over and over again for hours of the day, standing at attention, food deprivation, sleep deprivation, incredibly crowded cells with a bucket in the corner, no showers once a month. So under these, highly controlled environment, sounds like a nightmare, right? It's like torture chamber 24/7, and then you're over and over again doing that. So you can turn people kind of into an automaton where they will come out and you ask them, what was your mistake? I listened to illegal preachers. And so in that sense, they are it's the old classic brainwashing, which kind of sounds like it's something from the 50s, right? Korean War, we fought, and the Chinese were brainwashing people. But there is a technique to do that. Some people have gotten out, but you know what they do next? They make them work in a factory. So they're still separated from their families. They have no choice. Here, sign this labor contract. If you don't, you can go back to the camp. So they're being indoctrinated, but, it doesn't, it's a horrible violation of conscience. It's utter misery. A lot of people are staying in about a year, we think. And then when they're out, they're still not free.
So what?
And,
so what can we do? And I know we're talking with Louisa Greve, and we're talking about the Uyghur Human Rights Project. And I know obviously one of the biggest things we can do right now is just let people know what's going on. But is there anything else we can do?
Great question. First of all, there is a bill in Congress. Has overwhelming bipartisan support, and these days that is pretty rare in Washington. The Senate already passed by unanimous consent a bill back in September, the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, and the Congress just on December 3rd voted 407-1 on another Uyghur bill. And the reason it hasn't become law yet is because those 2 bills are slightly different. So for anyone concerned, call up your member of Congress in Washington and say you're horrified about what the Chinese government is doing to the Uyghur people and, religious repression in China. Please make sure that Congress acts on this, and we'd love to have a bill sent to the president's desk as soon as possible. Another thing that's happening is our pocketbooks. So this is an economic issue, too, and I can explain that, and people can act on that.
Yeah, I mean, go for it, yeah.
Yeah. So cotton. your home state, Arkansas is a cotton grower. Cotton production has gone down. Just looking that up, you know what's happening? The region where the Uyghurs live, on the maps it's called Xinjiang. That's with an X, very confusing. But anyway, in Xinjiang, it's the source of 80% of China's cotton. Right now, over the last 3 to 4 years, the Chinese government has forced these Uyghurs into these factories where they're working below Chinese minimum wage, which is, as you know, very low, as little as 35 cents a day. And they're producing those cheap cotton goods. This is one of the extreme manifestations of China's undercutting our own markets. And these are basically forced labor goods. And so one thing we really want people to do is make sure our government, our Commerce Department, Customs and Border Protection are actually taking action on forced labor goods coming in and being sold at Walmart and Costco that are basically produced by slave labor. I know that's an extreme word, but, it's the only one that fits the situation. Total police state where the Uyghurs live, Chinese government forcing people to work for nothing. And that's why the U.S. government has a law prohibiting the importation of forced labor goods. And it really requires, the people to make their voices known and say, why aren't we doing more to stop these goods that we know are being produced by these political prisoners?
That's very interesting. I hadn't actually thought about that. I hadn't actually thought about the trade issues at stake here, and how we wouldn't want to do anything to support that kind of system. I wonder, Louisa, are you concerned at all that maybe something less serious, but still serious? You have these groups like the NBA, the guy who commented on what was going on in Hong Kong, supporting a free Hong Kong, and then the backlash that ensued, and then the kowtowing, and it's almost like the more business what we do with the Chinese, the more we become like them, or we put our American values aside and embrace their values of communism and totalitarianism. Are you concerned at all by that?
Yeah, what the NBA did, throwing the Rockets under the bus, it's really un-American. How come we're standing up for Chinese Communist Party policies instead of American values of freedom? It's hard to believe. And, this happened again. So everybody saw what happened to the NBA. It actually just happened again to, international soccer. Arsenal, for anybody following this team, one of the players stood up and said, I don't understand why Muslims around the world aren't also speaking up for their fellow Muslims. It's crushing them. People are dying of torture. And so guess what the Chinese government did? Pulled their game because one player spoke up. So that kind of hostage-taking and retaliation should let everyone know we really can't continue business as usual with China. This is a government that just is covering up its crimes, continuing, as you said, like this depraved crimes against their own people, and then exporting the approval of that and demanding that businesses that want to do business with China, that they stand up and applaud. So it really is right. I'm really glad you're covering issues where trade with China is just not on a level playing field.
No, I don't think it is, and either. And of course, I think when we hear you talk, Louisa, I think it also puts the Hong Kong protests in a proper perspective and context, because they don't want China to have any more influence than they already have over Hong Kong because of what's happening to groups like the Uyghurs.
Absolutely. It's Hong Kongers are fighting for their freedoms, heroes to me, and people who really love freedom all over the world, and they are saying, we know what the Chinese government is capable of in Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs live, called the Uyghur homeland. Tracking devices on phones, facial recognition cameras everywhere. It's a dystopian nightmare, like in a movie, and it's actually happening in real time. They're using facial recognition cameras to track everyone. The Hong Kongers are saying, what would stop China from doing that to us? So it's great that you're standing up by, highlighting the Hong Kong issue, because that is the front line of freedom today.
Louisa Greve, we appreciate it so much. Again, you're the director of the Global Advocacy for the Uyghur Human Rights Project. Folks, look them up. Louisa, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning, and I'd like to do it again sometime.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Paul.
All righty.